In this example program, we're going to create a program that converts a measurement in yards to feet. And one of the first things we need to do is make sure we understand the problem. One way to do that is something called an IPO chart. The IPO stands for input, process, and output. So what we'll do is go through our problem statement and make sure we have the correct inputs, we know what the process is, and we know what the outputs are. If we don't understand the problem, we can't solve it. Okay, so in our problem statement, we were going to be given a measurement in yards, so we'll just put that in, yards. And the process, okay, is a conversion, and we're looking for feet. So if you look at an assignment statement, okay, the number of feet is going to be equal to the number of yards, okay, and that'll be times 3. And the output, of course, will be in feet. Okay, now these are variable names, so what variables will allow us to do is actually store values for these in memory. Okay, so let's transfer this to our C++ code now. The first thing we want to do is create variables as placeholders, so we can look at our IPO and we see we've got 2 variables. For right now, I'm going to make both of them int, which stands for integer. They're going to be whole numbers. And we have 2. One is feet and the other is yards. So what we're doing right now is just declaring the variable, so we're creating a placeholder for those to be able to accept values into RAM. Okay. The next thing we need to do is ask for the number of yards. Okay, and we'll do that in 2 steps. We'll actually start with our cout statement, prompting the user to enter the number of yards. Okay, and the second cin statement, which will get input from the keyboard. Okay, and when I actually put that input from the keyboard, will go into the yards variable. Okay, so we've got our input. We'll do our process next, okay, which is just the feet. It's going to be equal to the yards that we just input, and we'll multiply that times 3. And every statement, remember, in C++ has to end with a semicolon. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is just our output statement. So cout, and we'll say the number of feet is, okay, and then we'll kind of combine this. So we'll do another set of arrows. Okay, now don't get your arrows mixed up like I just did here. Make sure that you point those in the right direction. Okay, so I got cout, the number of feet is, and then I'll output, my output variable is feet. Okay, and what that'll allow me to do is combine these 2 things into the same output statement, kind of like the inline does. Okay, so we've got our program. The main program logic is not the declaring the variables, it's here. So we've got our input, process, and our output statement. Okay, let's execute this and see if it works. And I'm going to use a simple test variable to start out with. I'm just going to say 1 yard and hit enter and see if we get something reasonable. The number of feet is 3, and that seems reasonable. 1 yard should be equal to 3 feet. I may want to actually include my inline here, just so it's not quite so cluttered when we run it. Okay, and if it works for a simple number, then it should work for a little bit bigger number. We'll put in 10 yards is equal to 30 feet. Okay, and we can go back to our original IPO chart and make sure that we're doing what we need to do. So the main thing is check our outputs. Did we output what we needed to output feet? Remember, this is a simple example. So once it gets more complicated and we've got numerous inputs and we're asked for multiple outputs, sometimes beginning programmers may forget an output here or there. So it's not a bad idea to check your problem statement, or if you've done an IPO chart, to check it against what you've done to make sure you've got all the outputs that were required. Let's do one last thing on this. I'm going to execute it one more time and show you what happens if I put something like 1.5 yards. Okay, 1.5. It still comes out with 3. Okay, and that's because we declared these variables as integers. An integer variable can only hold a whole number. So if we put in something like 1.5 for the input of yards, it's going to get chopped off. If we want to deal with floating point numbers, we use a different variable data type of double. And so we'll change both of these to doubles. And we'll run that one more time. And we'll try that again. 1.5 yards should be about 4.5 feet. Okay, so if your program is dealing with anything like money or anything where you expect decimals, you want to declare your variables as double. If you don't really, as is in this case, you can use int for integer or whole number. Okay, that's our example for a conversion for yards to feet.